Hey there, welcome to Outdoors and Country Living. We're going to make some homemade molasses cookies. I hope you stick around to see how I do this. Let's get started. Here's our ingredients. I have a homemade pumpkin pie spice blend on the left, some freshly milled whole wheat flour, molasses, unsalted real butter, 1 whole egg, baking soda, salt. We use pink Himalayan salt. I have sugar. This is a pure organic cane sugar and some homemade brown sugar. The recipe for the brown sugar and the pumpkin pie spice blend that I make homemade will be in the video description below. Please click the word more to see all of the detailed information. How about we get started making these delicious molasses cookies from scratch? You'll be glad you did. I'm using a stand mixer and a baking sheet with a piece of parchment paper. Baking on parchment paper is a game changer if you haven't ever done so. Make sure you preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit before we get started. To your mixer, add 1 cup of sugar, white sugar, 1 cup of melted butter. Again, this is unsalted real butter. 1 whole egg. A 1/4 cup of molasses. We're going to mix that together. Until that stubborn egg gets blended in. There we go. Half a teaspoon of salt. 2 teaspoons of baking soda. Mix that together. 2 teaspoons of the homemade pumpkin pie spice blend. Again, reference the video or the recipe in the video description. Combine that. 2 cups of flour. You may use all-purpose flour. I'm using freshly milled flour made with soft white wheat berries. We mill this ourselves. It works up differently to traditional flour because it's very light and airy. So it usually requires a little bit more flour. And you will see me adding additional flour until a soft dough forms. If you're using the traditional all-purpose flour, you shouldn't need to adjust it. But if you do notice the dough working up similar to mine, just use the same process. So obviously there's not enough flour in here yet to form a nice dough. When you're making homemade cookies, if your cookies are quite flat, it's usually because you're not adding enough flour. So you can always alter your recipe as needed. In my kitchen, recipes are guides for me to be creative and add things that we like or remove things that we don't care for to make it our own. I'm not a recipe follower per se, but I use them as inspiration to create my own. So you can see I'm just adding more flour until a soft dough is forming. And it's cleaning the bowl up nicely. That's what I want to see. So now that we have our dough made, we can start baking some of these delicious cookies. So onto our baking sheet that has the piece of parchment paper. I'm using a cookie scoop to make walnut-sized mounds of the dough. I'm spacing them about 2 inches apart. And our oven is warm at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. So once we get the dough on the baking sheet, we're going to sprinkle the tops of these dough mounds with some of the homemade brown sugar. There's no set amount here, just to your preference. Again, the homemade brown sugar recipe will be in the video description below, as well as this cookie recipe. Once we get them topped with the brown sugar, they're going to go in our 375 degree Fahrenheit oven. Bake these cookies for 8 to 10 minutes. Once you get them out of the oven, let them sit here for a couple of minutes before you try to remove them with a spatula onto some cooling racks. If you try to remove them too soon, they're just going to fall apart. The biggest challenge is keeping fingers out of the kitchen. So once they've set up a couple of minutes on the hot baking sheet, I'm removing them onto some cooling racks to finish cooling all the way. I'll just let them sit here until I get the rest of the dough baked. Let them cool completely, and then they're ready to enjoy. If you've never baked homemade cookies on parchment paper, it never sticks, and it makes for really easy cleanup. Give it a try if you haven't. So that's how I make delicious homemade molasses cookies from scratch. Store them in an airtight container until they're gone. Hope you enjoy this. May God bless you. Take care of yourselves.